This is Prime Sports NASCAR on Prime Sports Network. And after talking about the 500 on yesterday's show, we wrapped that up, put that in the rear view. It's now time to look straight ahead at Daytona and NASCAR, Eric. We have the final race of the regular season. And I got to tell you, I'm excited because we've had to deal with a lot of boring races for and rain delays. And I just can't remember the last time I was actually real excited about or interested and saying to myself, hey, I think we'd have a good race. And I don't know how long. And now I know no matter what, as long as, of course, rain and lightning stays away, which is always an issue, that we are going to have some sort of fun racing, and we may even have ourselves a surprising winner, which happens a lot in these types of races. So I'm looking not only forward to that, but the fact that, hey, we are in a first time ever Daytona end of the regular season race situation where anything can happen at any time.
Yeah, this is going to be a wild one. Selfishly, at first, when the schedule was announced, I was a little upset because that's always been Daytona, 4th of July weekend. It's been tradition. My family has always joined me down there since I was born. They've been going down there for a family vacation. Then I started doing the media stuff and covering the race. And now we can't do that because it's at the end of August and kids have school and it's just not a family vacation. But for the playoff, everything on the line, this is a perfect spot for it because this is going to be wild because you can't this is the one time that you're going to get a potential upset winner to race their way into the playoffs. Because let's be honest, if this was at Indianapolis here, like it's been the last few years, or Richmond, the playoffs are pretty much set. It's just going to be a battle between Matt DiBenedetto, William Byron, and Jimmy Johnson for the final two spots, and one of them wasn't going to make it. Yep. Now it's wide open. Anybody can win. So that's what's going to make this race fun on Saturday night.
All right, before we get into the race activity this week, let's also put a neat little bow tie on last week and also last week's news. I know we didn't have much chance to talk about the Goodyear situation. We're anticipating at some point some other news will come out about this, but who knows? But look, considering you have the president, considering you have NASCAR and Goodyear, something is going to come out about this. Just to kind of update everybody, and I'm sure you know about it, Goodyear, which is the tire supplier of NASCAR, they were under scrutiny. They had to leak diversity policy that came out, and it wasn't good because under acceptable was Black Lives Matter, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender pride, LGBT. Unacceptable was Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, MAGA, and politically affiliated slogans and material. The last part's fine. All the rest, not fine. And then the president had to come out of, after the president tweeted and said, don't buy Goodyear tires, the Goodyear had to come out and they had to put out their statement, which basically said that there were misconceptions about our policy. This isn't what we stand for. The problem I have with this, Eric, is that I haven't heard anybody getting fired. I haven't heard and we haven't heard anything else. We're going to hear about this story down the road. No question.
Yeah, because they're the sole tire provider for NASCAR. Every car has a tire on them. I saw there was a story. Granted, being in Indy, covering the 500 stuff all last week, I was knee deep in that. Did see this story. And the one thing that popped my eyes was, I don't know what website wrote this. It was a major news outlet, but about how the Trump car is going to run Goodyear tires. And I get what they're saying because, yes, there's a Trump car, and it has to run Goodyear tires. Yeah. There's no other alternative. That's what caught my eye. I'm like, what's going on here?
It's like racing the Trump car with the tires spinning, saying the words Biden on it.
Yeah, like it's like
that's weird.
The rule. Yeah, and it's just they can't run any other tires. So,
yeah.
But yeah, NASCAR, I could see why they've kind of stayed out of it because it's a no-win for them if they comment.
Sure.
But eventually somebody's going to have to say something because we've seen in this world of racial injustice that this isn't going to go away. We saw the NBA yesterday cancel games. Baseball had a few, and I don't think NBA is playing again tonight. This is going to get brought back up. It's not going to go away. Somebody out there, we know there's always those knuckleheads on the internet that don't let things die that could die. And
yep.
NASCAR could let this thing brush aside and like, hey, look, we're just going to race and ignore this. Somebody's going to bring it up. It's not going to end. Somebody somewhere sometime is going to say, look, NASCAR's still racing Goodyear. So it's eventually going to get brought up. And to me, it goes to show if past history serves correct, you want to stay ahead of this than wait for that. So I'd be interested if NASCAR has something to say between now and that happening, because with everything going the way it is right now, it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and look, same thing. This is not good no matter what side of the political party you're on.
Mm-mm.
You can't say this. You can't be a company, a major company, and say things that are attacking Democratic policies and Democratic people, especially with an election coming up. So it's not good on either side. That's why, again, I think that at some point, I don't see where Goodyear can just brush it aside unless they fire someone or discipline someone in some way. If you don't fire someone, at least suspend them. I don't know. But if you're not disciplining someone for it, then I'm not sure I understand where your principles are related to what you said your principles are, because this person got you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it could ruin a big account with NASCAR.
Yeah,
that's what
just a little account, just a small one.
Yeah, because they're the sole provider of all three national touring divisions. It's their only Goodyear tires. So that's what I thought. I thought eventually, like, this could have quickly ended if Goodyear came out like, hey, that was a rogue branch in this city and this state. The people that were involved have been terminated. We've promoted people from within, and it's a rogue situation. We're sorry, move along. Yeah. But the fact of silence since then speaks a lot of volumes to me. That because let's be honest, not trying to get in a political realm, but if this happened the other way around, say just flip it,
it'd be all over the news networks.
Yeah. So that's where I feel like NASCAR needs to at least say something, because the other way around is a lot of their fan base, and that's why I said this isn't going to go away. Being an election year, somebody is going to bring something up. I wonder this weekend with all these games being canceled or athletes sitting out.
Well, the NBA people have already said they're playing again, like tomorrow.
They're playing. I thought I saw that, but
you know why? Because they realized after they took the stand that nobody cared. You know, it's like the people who are watching you right now, and there's not a lot of people watching you right now, are the people who agree with you. So you're not helping anybody.
No,
and I think they realize that.
Yep, and I'm wondering how many questions. I know I'm going to be covering more IndyCar this weekend, still have some NASCAR stuff, but some knucklehead is going to ask Bubba Wallace why he didn't sit out. You know it's coming, because Lewis Hamilton over in F1 is being asked why he's not sitting out in F1. So you know it's coming. I just hope Bubba Wallace is smart, and I'm not trying to say getting the political or racial or anything like that. I just hope he at least plays this smart and just declines comment and let's go racing. Let's stay out of this, because that's going to bring it right back in again. Because let's be honest, let's just call a spade a spade. Bubba Wallace has to race this weekend. He's not in the playoffs. This is a great chance for him to win.
And he could get into the playoffs.
That is a lot of money that you can serve a platform in the playoffs if you want it. But if you skip this week, you're not going to get in there. So
he ain't skipping nothing.
No, they can't. There's just no way. But some knucklehead out there is going to ask him. You know it's coming. That's where I think the Goodyear thing will get brought up because of that.
Well, look, bottom line is that at least this has stopped happening outwardly at Goodyear, because if it ever comes out again in some way, shape, or form and gets leaked again, I mean, then it's really over. So,
yep. Oh, yeah.
But like you said, that's something that we will eventually find out at some point. All right. Now, on the racetrack, first race last week, the Truex Almirola situation. How surprised were you when Truex slammed Aric Almirola in the way that he did? Was that just typical hot head racing deal? Was there something personal going on there that we weren't aware of?
I think it was just a racing deal. I think Truex is he's happy these runs, these top three runs are going.
3-3-3-3-3, 2-2, 3-3-2, 2-2. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think it's just that emotion boiling over, because any driver would love to finish.
Absolutely.
you do it long enough, you're like, man, I want to win. This sucks being this close. And that's at Indy. A couple. I was talking to Simon Pagino and Alexander Rossi and about the 500, and Rossi, like he said, I think about losing last year's race, finishing second, than I do about winning. Like second sucks. So I think that's just Truex. Just at this point, like, hey, I'm sick of finishing second or third. I want to win, and you cost me a shot at a win type deal, because he knows, and he mentioned in his post race media availabilities, his transcripts that I was reading, he knows the lack of playoff points right now could hurt him compared to looking at where Harvick and Hamlin and even Logano and Keselowski sit. If he needs to rely on those, he doesn't have as many as he's had in years past. So a win would have given him 5 more. He knows how close he is, and Almirola just got in his way and took it. Almirola got the brunt of his frustrations.
Yeah.
I think. I think it's all gone at this point. I don't think he's like holding a grudge against Almirola.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we didn't see anything happen on Sunday. So, what about the concrete issue at Dover? Because we talked about how it affected the Indy 500. Different situation, but it would have been a long delay. We got another one of these bad concrete delays in NASCAR. It's happened before. It's just, I don't know. I mean, what is that about? Is that about time to resurface the track? Is there something NASCAR could have done better? What happened there?
I just think it was a fluke. We saw it happen at Martinsville. Probably 2004, 03, somewhere around there, early to mid 2000s. And the concrete in the corner was coming up, and I believe it was Rusty Wallace or Gordon. Somebody hit it. The only reason I remember that was like high school graduation party was that day, and we had it on. I'm like, what happened there?
Right.
So I don't know if that's just a concrete type deal, just bad luck, but I don't think they need to resurface it per se. I just think they need to somehow figure out how that can't happen again, and I think they will. There's some smart heads there that they'll come up with a solution. I mean, I don't remember the last time at Dover that has happened, so I think they can get that fixed and not have to worry about that again.
All right.
But I will say Bristol's a concrete track in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's a night race. We can't be having that.
No.
That will not go well.
Okay, and then we had the playoff drama between Jimmy Johnson and Byron, where Byron had such a bad day, finishing 28th on Saturday. Jimmy finishing 7th put him over the top. All of a sudden, Jimmy Johnson is in the driver's seat in the playoff situation, but then Jimmy Johnson actually it was he had gotten closer. Then Jimmy Johnson winds up looking like he was actually in good shape again on Sunday, and then he speeds, and then you're looking like, uh-oh, now Jimmy's in bad shape, but he still was able to make a run all the way back up to 3rd, holding off William Byron's 4th. And that weekend enabled Jimmy Johnson now to come within several points of William Byron and also Di Benedetto, and make this a real exciting possibility on Sunday if any of these 3 drivers actually survive wrecks.
Yeah, that's what's going to be interesting. They had a Zoom call today with Byron and Chad Canals and Jimmy Johnson and his crew chief. Jimmy Johnson's tomorrow. Cliff Daniels was today, his crew chief. And they were asked, like, hey, you're technically right now fighting your own teammate for that last playoff spot. And Daytona's a track you need drafting help. Do you draft with him? Like, how is this going to work out? Like, you don't want to push him because you're pushing it because every point matters. You're in theory pushing him to a playoff spot and you out. But they said, yeah, that's a great subject.
You can push him early.
We are gonna. Yeah, and they said they'd even right now their goal is to push Matt Di Benedetto out. They're going to try to get both of them in. So that's going to be interesting to watch. Like, say it comes down to 5 to go and Di Benedetto might be on the low line and running up there with them, and Jimmy's behind Byron.
No, it's everyone for themselves.
Yeah, but if you know how Daytona is, if you're in tandem with, do you pull out and risk nobody going with you? Do you hang him out to dry? Like, that's going to be an interesting strategy to play. Plus, for them, do you go for stage points? Because we've seen sometimes these guys that in playoff Talladega, the playoff guys typically like, hey, I'm bowing out. I'm going to the back. Points don't matter to me anymore. I need to be here towards the end.
Yeah.
Do these guys go to the back knowing that, hey, I want to have a shot to win in the end? Or do they battle up front for stage points, knowing that, hey, these stage points could be the factor because all three of us could get caught up in a wreck in the final stage.
Sure.
So strategy is going to be key. And then I've got a story I'm sitting on. I'm waiting to see how this plays out, but the topic is going to be the coronavirus. Jimmy Johnson missed the Brickyard. He got 0 points. Right now, he's 4 points out. If he raced that race, where would Jimmy Johnson be right now in the standings? And two, was that test a false positive? Did we have a false test potentially keep a 7-time champion in his final season out of the playoffs? Because that's what I'm wondering. And granted, they're not going to talk about it right now. We'll see how we'll see how Saturday night shapes up, because my thing is, and nobody's really talked about this since, if we remember right, the Friday going into Brickyard weekend, it was announced Jimmy Johnson's tested positive and he's going to miss this upcoming race weekend. But all we keep hearing is this virus lasts between 10 and 14 days. So how did he test negative on that Monday, Tuesday after the fact and clear to drive the next weekend? Did he have it, but he had it longer than what he thought he had it and exposed people? Which, hey, look, there was not an outbreak in the garage even with the driver around. Or was it a false positive and the system ruined him of a playoff spot?
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that. I'm sitting on that right now just to see how Saturday night plays out. But it's an interesting topic that would be if Jimmy Johnson, say he misses it by 4 points or 5 points.
Oh, yeah.
We know he would have got at least that for the Brickyard, because you got those guys that get in the way that'll take the 40th or 35th spots, and Jimmy could have finished 33rd, 34th at the very least. Then what happened? So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about that, how that would play out for him.
Yeah, and we also talked about how they should think about changing the points in some way where they can monitor. Remember, we talked about this whole idea of sitting in the back. And how they shouldn't allow that, and maybe if they did have some sort of point situation where, hey, if you're doing that in this particular race and you're doing it for a certain amount of time, that works against you points wise somehow.
I would be all for maybe tripling the stage points. Maybe give them a lot of points on the line to where, hey, if you're Jimmy Johnson, you're 4 points back. You can't just ride around the back, because now you're basically saying, I've got to win the race or I'm done. Because if William Byron, say he wins both stages, that's 60 extra points. You're no way you're catching him at that point. So maybe that would be enticing enough to make these guys race. Because let's be honest, this is why I'm picking who I'm picking. We'll talk about later. But I almost wonder if some of these guys that are already into the playoffs, that they are going to go to the back, because what incentive do they have to race up front? And they're going to avoid all that carnage in the end, and they might just be there in the end to win. So I feel like this plays into a strategy of a Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, guys like that what incentive do they literally have to race up front? Why would you want to risk in a pandemic tearing up a race car? Because you probably might use this car in Talladega in the playoffs, that you can, hey, get in the back, just ride way in the back, just borderline losing the draft in the back.
If that happens, then they're going to have to, if they want this race back into the same part of the schedule, they're going to have to make some changes as far as the points are concerned.
That's why I'm curious how Saturday's going to, the ending will be wild, but I'm curious how do we need 400 miles if that's how this race is going to look? That's another topic. I'm waiting to see what Saturday night holds. But if I'm one of the 13 drivers already in the playoffs, gain one playoff point for a stage win? You know what? I'd rather save that and just ride in the back, because they don't need points. They're already in.
Well, the other thing too is, and we've seen drivers try to hang out in the back and they still wind up getting caught up sometimes. And I think we've seen drivers in recent years decide that, I think what's best is, let me just try to run this race like a regular race, and I want the lead.
Yep.
And the more you can, now look, you have to make sure you have a good car, and that's going to take a little while. It might take 20 laps, 30 laps, but if you feel like after a short while, I got a really good car and I could win this race, I think I've got that car. And I might just say, hey, you know what? Just stay up front. Try to stay up front, because if you could stay up front, you might be able to also...
You're ahead of it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and Harvick, we saw what he did in the 500. He literally did ride in the back. Him and all the Stuart Haas guys went to the back. Other than Almirola, he had a really good car and stayed up there. But they in this last stage, but the first couple stages, I remember they just rode around the back. They almost lost the draft. Just hey, I'm going to stay so far back where if there's a wreck, I'm so far back here, I'm not going to hit it. I'm just going to line up with my
Yeah.
teammates. So that's what I was a little nervous about this weekend because they're all starting up front together. Harvick's on the pole.
Yeah, but they could get
And
to the back in 2 laps.
exactly. I'm wondering if it's one of those, hey, I'm going to keep the track position as long as I can. And then if guys start coming up, like, hey, I'm bowing out. I'm just going to ride that high line. You guys go. I'm staying back here. Or do they ride up front and then maybe at the end of the stages, maybe, hey, I'm bowing out. I don't need stage points. This is going to get crazy. I'm going to the back. You guys keep your stage points, and I don't need any. They might pit. That'd be my other factors with 2 to go. Do they just line up as teammates
Yeah,
and just pit?
sure.
Like, hey, you know what? Like, I don't need this.
Absolutely.
Let's just get on pit road. The caution's coming out in 2 laps. We're not going to get lapped. I've got drafting partners that come out of the pits, and so that's going to be an interesting strategy. I think, or Saturday night.
Well, but I think if you're Johnson, DiBenedetto, and Byron, and especially if there's a possibility that you're thinking, hey, you know what, these guys, and by the way, you have Chase Elliott in your own team. You could just talk to those guys and say, what's your strategy?
Yep.
You know, how are you
Yes.
thinking about doing this? And if they kind of have that same strategy that, hey, yeah, you know what, other guys like Elliott are in this position and we're thinking of pitting with a couple to go. I'm Jimmy Johnson, Byron, and DiBenedetto. I need to take advantage of that, and I need to get up front, and I need to gobble up as many stage points as I can just in case. Because if those guys end up not getting stage points, even though if it's just a few points here or there, that make a whole difference. I mean, you go end up with 8 stage points, and Byron's got 2. All of a sudden, Jimmy Johnson's got the lead.
Yep, and that's why I think those guys need to go 4 stage points.
Yeah.
That's why I think they're saying with Byron and Johnson, for the first half of the race to the end of the second stage, they've got to work together, where Elliott and Bowman can work together and maybe go to the back, and since they don't need the points, and then in the final stage, I'd split them up again. That way they're not pushing the other one. You could both get them in. Maybe have Elliott push Johnson and Byron and Bowman hook up, and then but the first half of the race, it's the opposite. Byron and Johnson hook up and go for stage points and get as much as they can because DiBenedetto, that's the key for him is they're aligned with Penske, but none of the 3 Penske guys need stage points. Who helps him out in the Ford camp because it's not going to be as good as the Penske guys. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
I think strategy is going to be more to play on Saturday night than maybe some chaos.
Now, if Kurt Busch or Clint Bowyer were to wreck early, is there any way they could miss the playoffs without one of those other drivers winning a race?
Kurt, no, he's clinched. Bowyer, yes.
So Kurt's clinched.
Kurt is clinched. Yeah.
Okay.
Bowyer just needs 34th or better. So
he has to make sure that, but still, he has to avoid a wreck early.
Yep, that's why if I were him, I 100% would go to the back. Yes, you could use this because he could get a couple stage points, and I think
no, you're not risking that. No way.
I don't know if I would risk it if I was going to be 34.
Not up 57 points. No way.
No, to me, it's like, hey, you can make your life easier. It just depends.
Nah.
For him, I think I would say if you're running in the top 10 with like 5 to go, then you might want to risk it. If not, if you're like 10th and back, like just bow out. Maybe we'll see how the stages run.
Yeah, but if you're running in the top 10 with 10 to go, you've clinched it because there's gonna be a wreck.
You pretty much have,
and you're not going to finish past 34th at that point.
No, because you don't want to be in the top 10 and you get in a big wreck, but there's 8 cars in the wreck and you're 35th. Like that, that's where that could hurt him. So if I were them, my blueprint for them would be like, screw the stage points.
Oh, yeah.
You just need to be we know 34 cars are not running at the end of this race. That's just not
How many cars? 40?
40.
Okay, so
that means there'll be more than 6 are going to wreck.
Yeah.
That's
and as soon as he knows that, like as soon as they tell him in his ear, hey, there's been a big wreck. Okay, how many cars are out? Hey, just so you know, now with 100 laps to go, 150 laps to go, you can't finish any worse than 32nd. That's it.
Go. Yeah.
Now you can win the race. You're on
Yep.
your own. Okay.
Yep.
Uh,
So that's why I said it's really between the three: DiBenedetto,
but
Bowman,
again, you got
or
to make sure.
DiBenedetto. Yeah,
Okay, but what happens if Boyer does wreck early and finish 35th or 36th? What do the other drivers have to do without winning in order to beat him out?
I would say definitely a top for DiBenedetto and Byron. Um, top two, top three. Like they might need to like finish second and third, depending on stage points, because that will help too. Like if the Benedetto gets 2 stage wins, that's 20 extra points. That means he only has to finish really at that point top 15, and he'll pass
So what you're
Boyer
saying
at that
is
point.
Boyer is really the only thing that could realistically screw him if he finishes 35th and 36th is if another driver outside of the points race of the playoffs wins the race, steals
Pretty
the
much.
spot. Now he has to worry about DiBenedetto or Byron.
Yes. Yeah. Like if Jimmy Johnson or
Those
McDowell or
guys still have to win.
Bubba, yeah, if one of them wins, they essentially take a playoff spot, and then it's between Boyer, DiBenedetto, and Byron for that last spot. And right now, he's got such a good advantage. You just don't want to lose that advantage.
Yeah.
So I get the stage point thing because something could happen like that. But if I were him, I just think that's too big of an advantage.
Sure.
But look, the Benedetto lost 35 points in one weekend at Dover. So, I mean, anything's possible. But that's a lot to lose in one
Yeah,
race.
I mean, he's
I
got
just don't see it happening.
49, 48 points up. I mean, come on. That's just.
That's a race win. There's
Yeah.
43 points on the line for a race win. You're basically giving up a race win and bonus points. That's a lot. He might be able to clinch it after the first stage when they're like, hey,
Probably.
these guys can't catch you.
Yeah.
So just you're good now. But yeah, to me, I think he's good. That's why I count him as in.
Is Johnson?
I mean, 13 have clinched.
Is Johnson the only one that could win without winning? I mean, get into the playoffs without winning?
I haven't looked.
I mean, Jones is 50 points back.
So yeah, 50 is going to be. He could, in theory, but it would
again.
It would
he
take,
needs the wreck early from some of these cars.
Yeah, it needs a wreck early, a couple stage wins, and then a top 10 finish. But I mean, it's possible, I guess, if DiBenedetto and Byron and Johnson all crash early going for a stage win, and Jones is sitting there, wins a couple stages, and gets a top 10, then yes. But that's asking for an awful lot to happen. When I just have a feeling that DiBenedetto, Byron, and Johnson are smarter than that. That even going for stage points, if it gets a little hairy up there, that again, bow out. That's the easiest thing to do is bow out. Being there in the end is going to pay a lot more.
You remember what happened to Jimmy in Charlotte a couple of years ago?
Yeah, oh yeah, so. Yep. That's where it's key. That's where I feel like this race is a strategy race than anything else because of this. There's a lot more strategy that's going to go on. It's a high speed chess game, is what this is going to be.
And you don't have any confidence in Erik Jones anyway yourself because in our fantasy league you threw him off your team with your last week of driver transactions. So once the playoffs started in our fantasy league, we can't make any moves unless there's an injury or a virus. So because of that, you decided to move on Jones. I picked up Chris Buescher, and then you decided, well, I'll take Custer. So we basically have done that. You've taken Custer, who is going to be in the playoffs, and I went with Chris Buescher. I just like the way that Buescher has been. He's starting this 5-race run for him is his best of the season. He had a very good year last year. I think people don't realize he had a very consistent top 20 year last year. And with a new team, you give him a little time to kind of get into the the rhythm with his new team and crew chief and so forth. So Chris Buescher is just a much. You take a look at his stats. He's not a bad long shot play for this race because he was 6th at Talladega this year. He had a runner up in 3 Xfinity Series races at Daytona. And he's got 4 top 10s and 3 top 5s in 9 races in the Cup Series at Daytona, with the 4 other races ending in wrecks. He was also 3rd in the 500 this year. Yep. So Buescher's that's really why I was like, hey, even if I only wind up rolling the dice on Busher for this week. It might even be worth it. But then, of course, like I said, the fact that he looks like he's starting to race in the top 20s is all you're looking for with that type of driver on our fantasy teams.
Yeah, that's why when I first saw I read it wrong. I thought Pusher was available, and I jumped on him. Like, oh yeah, because he was one of my sleeper guys this week. I just have this feeling Busher's winning on Saturday night. And like you said, he finished third in the Daytona 500. And you got to look at that car, Stenhouse. We always talk about how great of a plate racer Stenhouse is. That was his car. Stenhouse won this race a couple years ago in that car, and Busher was good with JTG Doherty. And now he's got a Roush car, a Ford. So yes, that's when I saw that available. I'm like, oh yes, I want him. He is
you could have taken him. You snoozed, you lose.
Yeah,
you could have taken
him. I snoozed. Yep.
And I would have been on the outs. Well, I probably would have taken Jones over. I might have taken Jones over Custer. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have, because the thing with Jones is that you just, now that he doesn't have a team, you know that everybody that's affiliated with his team, they're all thinking in different directions. You got to be as one, and I just don't see it with Jones, and obviously you don't either.
No, and like you can look at right now, he's got 0 top 10 finishes in his last 6 races, 2 in the last 10. Yes, he won this race a few years ago too, but that was like a fluke because
stole it.
Was there like 7 cars running at the end? Like, and yes, he won the Clash. People will point to that. He won the Clash in February. Like 3 cars were running. It was Ricky Bobby because sprinted and beat him his car was damaged. He wrecked 3 times in that race. So I just don't have a lot of faith. I just feel like the Toyota camp is pretty solidified now. We know that Christopher Bell's the guy that they're replacing him with. Yes, they want him to win the race. Sure, they'd love to have a 4th Gibbs car in the playoffs, but I just don't see it happening. He's not great on super speedways. Yes, again, like I said, he's won, but they were fluke situations. And then I was thinking playoffs with Custer. I know he's in. He's been running better lately. Ever since Kentucky, that win, Indy. I'm sorry, Indy the week before that. He's been running a lot better. And playoff races statistically have shown the top 16 drivers, usually in the finishing order, are playoff drivers. So Jones right now, I just don't see him being in the playoffs. Custer is. I have a better shot of a win in the playoffs with Custer than I did with Jones.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
And I think if Jones doesn't make the playoffs, it's kind of at that point they're writing this off. I would be shocked. In the old days, it used to be at the end of the year, they would just, hey, you're out. Like, we're just going to move Christopher Bell over. Like, he's running the car next year. You're not in the playoffs. So I don't know why if he's not in the car, like why the last few races, granted sponsorships, they don't do that anymore. But like, what gain does he have by driving this car? Anyway, it just, to me, it makes him look worse. If I were him, I'd step out like, look, I'm focusing on next year. This car isn't going to be up to par. All the Toyota equipment, the good stuff's going to go to Hamlin, Kyle, and Truex. He's getting the bottom of the barrel stuff. So I don't see him winning Saturday, and I think it's going to put him in a bad situation for the 10 playoffs because he's not. I don't see him being a top 20 car past this point.
All right, now besides Busher, the other sleepers that you took this week, you got Di Benedetto at 30-1. You have Newman at 33-1. You've got You got McDowell, and you have Wallace and Ty Dillon. So those were your sleepers. I'm not going to include Byron in your sleepers. And by the way, we both have Byron and Busher, and I like Byron this week.
I do too,
because he's dialed in, which is what you want. He's got a win in the Xfinity Series at Daytona, and when he doesn't crash, he's done pretty well, including runner-up in this race last year. He led 44 laps from the pole in the 2019 500. And I think Jimmy Johnson and Byron, I just get the feeling that both of those cars, if they can avoid wrecks, are going to be there, just like they were on Sunday's race at the end, fighting neck and neck.
I agree. And if you remember, right, in the duel, which I know you can't take the Clash of Eric Jones, but you can take the duels. That to me translates over to this race because it was a night race in February, and he won. He won his duel, and he made some good moves in that race. I remember watching for the press box, like, whoa, this is a different William Byron. Who's this kid? Granted, we haven't seen a lot of that since, but yeah, he enters 8th and 4th, or 2 of his last 3 finishes on the season. He's got some momentum. That 24 car is typically good in Daytona. So like you said, if he stays out of a wreck, he's going to be there. I have no doubt in my mind. He's got the confidence of winning there in February in a duel. So I feel I would not be shocked if your top three finishers are Busher, Byron, and Jimmy Johnson, and when this thing's all said and done.
Yeah, and Johnson is actually the driver that I put my second most money on this week, behind Denny Hamlin. So yeah, I think, look, Jimmy's third, seventh, and fourth in his last three races. He's starting to peak at the perfect time. He knows how to race in these conditions, and maybe he knows at some point in this race he's going to have to win. So I think he's a perfect driver to pick, especially at 18-1.
Well, and you remember at Talladega, was it third or fourth he was running at the end, and Kevin Harvick spun him
That's
by
right.
accident.
Yep.
But he's got a good super speedway car, so same way, if he could stay out of trouble, yeah, he'll be there at the end. And like you said, he's using this experience to his advantage. Like he was asked, like, is this like, you're the outside looking in still last season, any pressure? And he's like, no, not at
Pressure.
all. I've faced more pressure over my career than this.
Yeah.
Like, this is nothing. Like, I think he could play some mind games with Byron and DiBenedetto, knowing that, hey, if Jimmy Johnson wins the first stage, that puts some pressure on DiBenedetto and Byron. Do they push a little harder? So, and that's where I look for Johnson to help Byron. I think Johnson's main goal is he's going to be a team player. He's going to help Byron because he knows, look, I don't feel pressure. I've got full confidence. I'm making this. I've only got to make, I mean, look, I'm 13 points from DiBenedetto?
Oh, that's nothing.
That's nothing. We can do that. We could do this together. We got this.
Yep, I agree.
And I'll win this. And Byron's only 5 points off of DiBenedetto. Like, you can make that up. Let me win. Just follow me, kid. So yeah, I expect both of them to have really big nights on Saturday.
And we also, you and I, took Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And again, that's for obvious reasons. This is a good situation for him, racing either at Talladega or Daytona. But he's got the win in 2017. He was second at Talladega by a hair to Ryan Blaney. And he's led 121 laps combined in the last 6 races at Daytona.
Yeah, he's always good there. He's that guy that we always
he could steal a spot.
He's there. Yep. This is and especially more intensity for him. This is the last chance.
That's it.
This is the one he said he's had circled. And remember in Daytona, he had the fastest car in February. He was untouchable. His only problem was in the 500 was he got that questionable penalty for passing below the yellow line, even though he was forced below the yellow line. Had to do an unscheduled pit stop for the penalty, put him in the back, finally started getting some drafting help back, and he got that wreck on a pit sequence. So, yeah, I would not put it past that 47 car. It was good. He's going to be one to watch this weekend because, again, if he doesn't get caught up in a wreck, and he's the same way. We've seen him be so aggressive. He's not making this on points. I just want to see him go to the back. I want to see what you can do with this aggression in the end. That's where it's going to be fun. So, he's got a Hendrick power. He's got a Hendrick motor. So I would rather see Ricky just hang out in the back. You've got to win this race to get in. Winning stages, that's not going to help you. You've got to win the race, but to win the race, you've got to be there. So if Stenhouse is there in the end, that's going to be a tough guy to beat.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left. So quickly, we also, the only drivers we 3 agreed on, Almirola, Logano, and Blaney. We actually put the same amount of money on each, Blaney and Logano. You and CJ had 20 and 15. I had 10. Same thing for Logano. Almirola 5 and 10 for me. We told you what Almirola, Almirola had the win in 2017. He always races well on these tracks. He was third at Talladega this year. And Joey Logano's got 6 straight top 10s coming into this race. 6th or better in 6 of the last 11 at Daytona, with a win in 2015 Daytona 500. Blaney's coming off the win at Talladega. He's got the 2 runner-ups in 10 races at Daytona. He's at, if he doesn't crash, he's another driver that will be there at the end. But he is having some problems this year. His average finish is 23.7 over his last 4 races, so he's not in the frame of mind, but this is the type of race that can change all of that. Blaney, Logano, and Almirola, we have all 3 of those drivers. That's where we are all simpatico. And if you had to pick one of the 3, who would it be?
Blaney. He's just good on super speedways. He's got 3 straight top 2 finishes. Second in the 500, 1 at Talladega. The last 2 races at Talladega. So I feel comfortable with him. What a better track to get your momentum back going to the playoffs.
Right.
So Blaney, I feel best about.
And also, you and CJ agreed. Actually, if you look at it, CJ and me agreed on Denny Hamlin. You decided no on Denny Hamlin, even though he has 2 wins in the last 3 races at Daytona. I was thinking, you know what? 3 wins in his last 4 is really asking for it at a place like
Yeah.
Daytona. I'm assuming that's where you went. I just feel like, you know what? Denny doesn't, I mean, if you look at it, I think he's only had a win in the last 5 or 6 races, which is, you would think, well, that's okay. But when he's going up against Kevin Harvick, he probably now wants to go out and get his win. But Hamlin's so good on these racetracks. You instead, besides Blaney and Logano, went heavy with Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, because Hamlin, you got to look, since 1982, only 2 drivers, Bobby Allison in 82, Jimmy Johnson 13, have ever swept both Daytona races. I just don't see Hamlin doing it again this year. The numbers are against them for that standpoint,
Sure.
But the other is Toyotas just don't have the strength in numbers. We talk about this a lot on super speedways. How they need to, you're going to see Fords working with Fords and Chevys working with Chevys, and Toyota's kind of out to lunch. They're definitely not getting work from people this weekend because you've got a Ford and Chevy drivers trying to get into the playoffs. So I just don't see the strength in numbers for them, because I feel like other than the stages, like we talked about, this might be a tamer race until the end. They're not going to have the strength in numbers to fight. Where Kevin Harvick, I mean, to get him for those kind of odds, he's had some bad luck on super speedways, but he's coming off the top 5 in the Daytona 500. He's got 11 top 5 finishes in his last 12 on the season. We know his blueprint. He's going to the back. It's just he might lead early because he's got the pole, but the minute he gets shuffled out, he's going to stay in the back, just like he did in the 500. Why would they change their game plan from the 500 to the 400 when it worked? And we've seen he's got the fastest car all year. I just feel like he's going to get some good drafting help. And was he 10-1, or 9-1, wherever he was at by last time?
Yeah.
That's great odds for somebody like that.
All right. Keselowski, Elliott, Kurt Busch. CJ went with those 3 drivers. Neither one of us touched any of those 3. Quickly, who would you take?
Probably Kurt. He's got 5 top 10s in his last 11 Daytona starts. Should have won this race last year. He was the one that pitted while leading. Lightning comes out, and we never go back to racing. So I just feel like out of the 3, he's the worst of the 3. But you got to look at Chase Elliott's Daytona stats.
I know.
Absolutely horrid. And then Keselowski used to be great, and then he's just been absolutely awful on super speedways too lately. So Kurt's the safe play out of those 3.
Chase just can't. He's always wrecking at these big super speedways. Incredible.
Well, 14th. 14th is his best finish at Daytona.
Average finish 26.8. 4 crashes in his last 5. He also crashed at Talladega this year, and he's never had a top 10.
Trust him. No.
Yeah.
So for those odds that he's got, I'd steer clear.
All right, and then the last one out of those sleepers that you mentioned, that you picked, who would you go with? Who's your top guy between McDowell, Wallace, Ty Dillon? I'll tell you what. Yeah, Newman, Wallace, McDowell, Ty Dillon.
I'd go Newman. I feel like this could be a storybook ending. Remember, he should have won the Daytona 500. I mean, he blocked and flipped, and the rest is history.
That's true.
He was 5th in this race last year and 14th in that Daytona 500. And then the year before that, he was 8th in both Daytona races, and then 5th in the 2017 Coke Zero Sugar 400. So Newman's a good super speedway racer, and what better fitting story would that be, other than Jimmy Johnson, 7-time champion, winning to get his way in, than Ryan Newman returning to Daytona and winning. So I feel like karma could be on his side.
That would be nice.
And that's why I went with because there's nothing about him racing right now, stats that say, hey, he's going to win this race. But that karma, and we've seen this track reward some stories like that, and that'd be a big story. It'd be a big talking point for NASCAR if he can win and Jimmy Johnson can point his way on the last wild card playoff spot.
All right, quickly, Wallace was runner-up in the 500 in 2018. McDowell has 6 top 10s in his 18 races at Daytona. Ty Dillon, 6th or better in 3 of his last 4 races at Daytona. And also, average starting position, the last 5 winners, 21.6. No Ford has won the last 5 races. Just 1 win in the last 16 from drivers in the top 2 rows. That was Dale Jr. on the pole in 2015. So, Eric, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week. Twice. We'll have our playoff preview show, and then we'll have our preview of which race kicks it off next week?
Darlington, Southern 500. Hey, and something's coming up that you're going to like. 5 straight night races starting Saturday night.
All right. Yep. Well, I don't know about a third Darlington race in the same season, but all right. At least it's at night.
But 5 of them in a row.
Thanks, Eric. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.